everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politically Depressed. As always, I'm your host, Eamon McAdam. Today's episode is another interview, and it's a conversation with Palestinian comedian Dana Saleh. Dana's online presence has been something that I've really valued over the years, and I remember so distinctly in some of my most depressive moments in 2020 and 2021 that her reels and her videos and her small pieces of comedy, but even some of her writings, were like beacons of hope, of light, of comfort, of affirmation. It was like a hug in the form of like a 30-second reel, but also I don't know how to explain it because it's not just about the content, it's also just her. And even though I don't know much about her as just a person that I know through Twitter, I always got a vibe. And so I really wanted to sit and talk with her, and as I was expecting, the vibe was giving, as the youth say today. Anyway, so we talk about a lot of stuff. We talk about comedy, we talk about her as a Palestinian comedian, we talk about the situation at the moment, and the grief, and the sort of feelings we have of inability, of impotence to do anything while we witness a genocide. But ultimately, the conversation that we have was so nourishing, and I loved it, and I hope you enjoy it too. I want to say before we start that, as of recording, the mass graves that I bring up in this episode, we have only learned more, and we have only discovered more and more bodies, and it is really turning out to be incredibly just horrific. I hope everyone is doing whatever they can to be putting pressure and doing whatever they can to stop this. At the local level, at the international, I don't know. But the pain and the trauma and the grief of this moment is definitely something that we hold throughout this conversation. And so, one last thing. If you don't follow me already, this podcast has an Instagram where I post more stuff related to these things beyond the podcast. And so, if you're not following me, go ahead and do so. Anyway, I hate doing these announcements, but I always feel like I should. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this interview. Hi, Dana. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dana Saleh. I am an internet person. Sometimes comedy, sometimes politics, always Palestine.
That's an introduction. So, yeah, I'll ask you the question I've been asking all my guests, and it is a difficult one. How are you doing?
Listen, this is a question that's obviously been asked a lot lately, and I'm grateful for people who do ask it. You know, a lot of people have come out that I haven't spoken to in a long time asking me this question. I don't know how to answer it, honestly. It's so difficult because I think for most of us, we just like we're feeling everything at once. And it just almost feels like sometimes you're numb. You don't even know, your brain can't comprehend, words can't explain. So it depends on the day, really. Like some days are better than others. There are days where you have like this fortitude and more clarity, and other days where it's just nothing is possible and you're just shutting yourself out from the world. So
Yeah. I've been having a very weird situation in my apartment, not my apartment, my building. I talked about it a few months ago on this podcast of an elderly neighbor who's now gonna go to a home and she had to give away her cat. And luckily, we know a friend who took the cat, and it was very upsetting. But I felt nothing because it is that numbness. It is that like, oh, I'm at capacity. I don't want to.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, where it's like you don't have the strength to deal with anything else. Even things that like obviously something big like that where it's like a very sad story that requires a lot of mental energy, but even the smallest things can be overwhelming, you know?
I don't know, because before any of this, the question of how are you was very easy to avoid, and now it is just very difficult to avoid. About like, I can't lie. I can't. Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm fine, because it feels like that takes so much more energy than it used to.
Yeah. I have to say, like I think when people are asking me that question, they're not like expecting anything. Like I can tell they're asking it truly out of care and not because they come in with this kind of like, what do you need energy more than like I want to just do my part of like making sure you know that I know you're okay type of thing. Like people are actually, they're fully opening their hearts and like willing to be like, listen, like if you need anything, I'm here. And opening that door for dialogue because like before any of this, the people like other than the fact that some people just didn't know, it was just like this topic that was it was just kind of in the back. It's just a back burner for most of us. I personally like compartmentalized it a lot, especially like being in the West. It's like you have to be careful with who you talk to about it. And it's been nice to see that like that door's been sort of blown wide open, you know. Though it's still hard. I mean, like not to say that I'm like willing to just talk to anyone about it because it is like very painful, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, here we're talking about Palestine, right?
Hmm.
For me, coming from Lebanon, in terms of just the most recent, like the last few years, it has been difficult talking to people here now being in the West in the last 2 years because it's always seen as like, oh, that's your thing, and not something that's implicating all of us and everybody, and especially here in the West and in Europe, but also in like the Americas, North America specifically. And so, yeah, you're right. It's sort of opened up to the fact that now it's not just your thing. People acknowledge when they ask that it's like they're a part of it. And that's kind of like new and good in a way.
Yeah, it's true. I forgot that you were not somebody who like you've lived most of your life in the Middle East, so this is kind of new to you as well, right? Like having to think twice before maybe you talk about it to somebody or
I mean, I've learned, I've figured it out or whatever. I just avoid it most of the time with most people. But
hmm
yeah, that's honestly been something that's very different where it's like you don't have to have that conversation with people. Like people don't ask with that kind of innocence of like, so how are you doing? I host a thing called the Palestine Watch Party every Sunday, and we watch films and we hold discussions, and it's a really cool group.
Oh, great.
One person who is Palestinian who lives in Oahu and Vermont. They grew up in Jordan, but they told me that a question they used to get sometimes from Americans is, "Are you happy?" And it's a bizarre
Interesting.
question. Yeah, it's a bizarre
Very.
question. Yeah, for many reasons, because there's also that weird framework of like you're meant to be happy, and why aren't you happy? And then how are you going to get happy? As opposed to,
Like I don't understand like why are they asking that? So do they know the person is Palestinian or this is just kind of the way that they ask how people are doing? Like,
well, it's actually though it's the assumption within the question, how are you? Because if you
hmm
answer I'm fine, okay. But if you answer I'm not doing okay, then the second question is why? Because it's assumed that if
mm.
you're, how, I mean, imagine the question, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Why? That'd be great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, that's been, I interviewed someone else, a friend of mine, Neda Hamse, and her kind of, she's very cool and resilient and whatever. And so when she was answering the question of like, oh, I'm doing all right, I'm fine. And I'm like, how? What do you mean? She's in Lebanon. She's Palestinian Syrian. And like,
Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you've personally experienced maybe and what you see in terms of like hope and the future of Palestine. Not to say that I'm actually very hopeful, but it's hard to in the moment feel good about anything. It's nice to hear that there are people that feel that way though.
I'm very jealous of it, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
My mother is one of these people for sure.
Oh yeah.
And very different. I mean, generation difference, but she grew up during the Civil War. And so, yeah, there's like a sort of experience, but also just a mentality. I don't know. My mother's very much like a mind over matter person.
Mm,
And I have no idea how, but I'm very jealous and
yeah.
constantly trying to manifest. Yeah.
Yeah, like how does that look like for somebody some like when I'm sure your mom is seeing all the things that we're seeing and it's like how is she able to transform that? That's a fascinating capability.
So it's like I was also having this conversation in the last watch party because there's like sort of two sides or like two ends of a certain spectrum where it's like of mind over matter, of this kind of new age mentality of like, accepting the fact that there are only so many things you can control and then being okay with the things you can't control. And again, so my mother is in Beirut and
Mm,
she's been lived in Lebanon her whole life, except for when we lived in Saudi. But yeah, it's this mentality of like, اللي راح يصير حيصير, what's gonna happen is gonna happen. And somehow, like,
yeah.
actually really accepting that, you become Zen. And I have no idea how to manifest that.
I
Or,
feel like maybe I have gotten close to that actually, because there are moments when I'm feeling stronger where it's like things. So, okay, I was reading some like personal journal stuff from 2 years ago, like recently, and I was kind of shocked at something I wrote because it's pretty much predicted what's happening in Gaza right now. Like in yeah, it was. I think it was like the logical conclusion to like this very violent, disgusting, depraved settler colony. Like that was there for that to end, something really horrific has to happen. It's like that always made sense to me, and I was writing about it. And so there's moments of clarity where it's like, not to say that this is acceptable, but it's like we're moving forward, right? Like it's I always knew that a lot of Palestinians had to die for Israel to end. I know it's hard even to say it out loud, but it's because of what we know. It's like you have to know your enemy and you have to realize how depraved they are. We can't ignore the fact that this is what we're dealing with, and it's like accepting that sometimes, and then understanding that like you need to have this fortitude to continue going in moments where I have the strength. I have a little bit of maybe what your mother has, when it's like there's a strength there. Otherwise, in general, though, I find that very difficult to maintain.
yeah. And I mean, like, a lot of this is like ancient wisdoms, you know what I mean? Like, this is stoicism of like, I don't know, 2000 years ago and way before and everything. And it is very Buddhist. It's very Zen. It's very,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and so that's why it's been like I've been describing myself as like a begrudging atheist because it's like been difficult, and there's a phrase that I learned to accept and like really understand its meaning when I was last in Lebanon, and especially like after the explosion, which is like كتر خير الله, which is, blessed be to whatever. And it's just like, yeah, everything's shit, everything's horrible, and we're all gonna die, it's all terrible. It's كتر خير الله, you know?
Yeah.
I kind of really understood that. Or there's another phrase. It's not even a phrase. It's just something that people say a lot of the times. Aishin, when you ask how people are doing, we're alive, and it's like there's like so much depth to it. It's like at least we're alive, and that's something to be grateful for.
Is it though?
Yeah, I know. That's a difficult one. Well, okay, that's the first joke. So I want to bring up if there is one thing to talk about. It is when I first got to know you online, it was through your comedy. And I've noticed you've done less comedy because obviously it's much more difficult to do comedy these days.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, the title of this episode will be shamelessly stolen from your Twitter bio, which is Comedy and Liberation.
Nice.
Yeah, just sort of you specifically, or like in your experience, how has comedy, I mean, its effect, or why do you do it? And like, especially lately, how it's been something that you've been navigating.
That is a very good question. I mean, comedy in general, like I do stand up and I do like online comedy content, right? So in terms of the stand up, obviously that's been very difficult. Like yeah, because I do have material about Palestine, and like to go on stage right now and not get a good reaction to a joke about Palestine would like just like destroy me. You know, I was telling a friend, I was like, if I, say my punchline and I don't get a reaction that's any less than like free Palestine, like I'm done. Like I can't handle. It's already like stand up is already so isolating, and it's like it's really about just that immediate reaction, which is already so difficult when it's not a political thing that's like very close to me. So imagining that devastation like multiplied given what's happening right now, it's like I fully just like removed myself from doing stand up in the last 6 months fully. Like I haven't done a single set. But it's also because obviously like the idea of joking about it just feels so wrong, right? And then I'm seeing so many more people coming out of the woodwork now that are just like talking about it in ways that feel respectful, and it's not just sort of using the there's a lot of cheap and kind of gross ways to talk about it, right? And like, is there all shitty comedians out there that are gonna use it to for like a cheap punchline? And that's another thing I didn't want to have to deal with, right? I'm like, I don't want to go to a show and have to see somebody, some sniveling loser who thinks that like he's edgy, like talk about this and has no idea what they're saying, right? But then I'm like I said, I'm seeing stuff online that like where these really kind of thoughtful, interesting. I don't know if you follow Amr Rahman. He's he's Australian, but I think he's Bangladeshi, but he lives in Australia and he's got this like political style that I find very it's just like it's just my it made me want to go back to the stage because he's doing it in a way that is still really hilarious but respectful and like thoughtful and he's it's almost niche. Like there are things that I think that a lot of people, unless you're, really politically kind of inclined, like you might not even be interested in. But it's like, who cares, right? Like at the end of the day, I do this because it speaks to me and I'm trying to say something through the comedy. But yeah, it's been the journey is kind of really on hold at the moment when it comes to stand up. I'm trying to regain the confidence by doing some online content. But I don't know. I don't know. There's just something I don't want to use it either. Like I don't want to use this trauma to like for like views. Sometimes it feels like that a little bit, and I don't know. I really don't. I'm having a very hard time navigating it, to be honest.
Yeah, it is very difficult because, like you said, doing it in a way which is respectful, but also like feels connected to the urgency and the gravity of the moment feels just impossible.
Hmm.
And I mean, but it's like interesting because it is in some ways your trauma. In many ways, it is your trauma. But at the same time, I don't know. There has been a lot of what I've heard described as like memification of genocide. And there are just so many different variations of this, and I find it morbid and really difficult to engage with. But I feel like there must be a place for it because, like you said, I agree that comedy for me, as like, I mean, as a writer, as someone who like, I do have a kind of dark comedy short film I made many moons ago, but I consider myself a funny person, and I use comedy in a way where it's like to get people on your side a bit. If you make someone laugh, they immediately let their guard
Oh yeah.
down. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
You form a kind of immediate bond, but there's a utility to it because then you can then say some stuff and share a message and say something that otherwise people might not be fully receptive to. And so to me, without that, comedy is kind of useless, or like it's sort of
Hmm.
a wasted opportunity. But yeah, in this moment, I feel like something I think you really hit on there is that if people need that bit of comedy to let their guard down and to listen to what you're going to say when it's on the topic of genocide on Palestine, those aren't the people you want to be connecting with in this moment. It feels really frustrating to have to win people on your side in this present moment. Where if they're not already like receptive, then fuck them. But yeah, so I don't know. It is something that I've seen other people be doing like stand up or doing online content. There's very few people who have been doing some forms of comedy that I'm like, that's actually really good. I'm trying to think of some examples.
Yeah, I would love to hear some examples because I have trouble also. Like a lot of people are making content about it. I'm like, most of it is not like whether it's like I'm trying to look for inspiration or just seeing what people want to watch. I find it fascinating and it's like an interesting like kind of like study of what's going on right now.
Lately, it's been very difficult because things are incredibly ugly and they have been like just indescribably horrible. I mean, mass graves. I've been kind of just screaming about these mass graves. I can't believe that it's still happening and we're uncovering this.
I
It's
know.
just, but I remember like October, right? And things were already horrible. But I think what Bassem Youssef did on the Piers Morgan show, the first thing he did was phenomenal.
Hmm.
I don't like Bassem Youssef. I haven't liked him for
I
a
know.
very long time. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it became obvious with his second Piers Morgan appearance, where it was like pay-per-view, and then all the opportunism and monopolizing, and just like it's like, bro, you had your minute, you did good, just sit down. But that was great. There's another one. There's a Lebanese comedian, Shadin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she
Love
did a
her.
video a few months ago specifically about pink washing, but I thought that was very good because also it kind of returns to this tradition in stand-up. I think one of the main ones that come to mind is like George Carlin, where it's very much, even though very problematic if you watch his stand-up now, there's a lot of bits that are like really fucked. But it's that mixing between like I'm doing a political monologue and comedy.
Yeah, actually, that's very true. I think that if you're going to talk about this, there has to be that element of like a little bit of a political monologue, which I struggle with because I'm like, who am I going to be talking to if I do this? And maybe that's like I'm like being defeatist by just like already thinking of the challenges instead of just going out there and being like, fuck it, I'm going to say what I want to say. But it comes from experience because I am in the West where not only are there a lot of people that are completely ignorant to what's happening, but there are a lot of fucking Zionist sympathizers out there, you
Yeah.
know? And obviously like I guess like the idealistic way of approaching it is like who gives a fuck? Like you gotta just go and do it. Yeah, I wish I was a stronger person. You know? Like I don't have that kind of Bassem Youssef style in your face. I don't I just I wish I had a little bit more of that like sometimes I channel it like on days when I'm feeling like I'll think about like these Palestinians that I'm seeing and I'm watching do these incredible things or like I try to find like that inspiration from people who are going through it. And I'm like, whatever I have to do on stage doesn't compare to any of this. Like, what the fuck? Why am I being such a little baby about it, you know? But I'm an overthinker. I zoom in way too hard sometimes, and like I'm incapable of seeing things for what they are. So yeah,
No, but it is still scary. It is still like I don't know. Again, for me being here, it is my first experience being confronted with Zionists and like being aware of their presence, and being aware of like
hmm,
I've been seeing stickers in my neighborhood of like bring them home, solidarity with Israel,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like, oh, these people are here. This isn't something over there. And I think there's so much in our culture that talks about like the concepts of resilience or like sumud and like steadfastness. But again, another thing that I feel jealous of, I don't feel like I have that. I too, I feel really like what you're saying, sometimes like weak and like cowardly. And part of it is like I need to accept it and like figure out how to deal with it because I can't just reject it. That's the whole point of this podcast, right? Like I'm being very publicly vulnerable and like holding space for people in similar situations because we can't just ignore it and be like, no, fuck it. You have to be strong and just keep going, doing the good fight. But I don't know.
yeah. Well, good for you for doing that because that is very vulnerable and I think maybe the acceptance is like step one towards figuring out how to overcome it, hopefully. Or just find our little niche of like us freaks in the back, like trying to like be like, we're doing a thing and you know, no one's listening. Like,
But like, how did you feel about your comedy before this present moment? Because like, obviously, shit was fucked for a very long time. Not as like daily, intensely, horrifically, whatever. But yeah, how did you like conceptualize? Because especially like online stuff, I remember one video in particular you had that I remember watching several times over and over again of like the US checking in on Israel and like, hey, or no, I think it's the UN.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there was I told myself when I started doing stand-up especially, I was like, if I'm gonna be on stage with a microphone, like I'm gonna talk about Palestine, right? And if I'm gonna be doing online content, like I gotta talk about because as soon as you have a little bit of a platform or a voice, you're like, okay, I gotta let people know what's real, what's going on. Things have changed obviously because now like way more people know what's going on, but back then, as if it was like a long time ago, like even up to a year ago, it's like you're still sort of navigating this like it felt like a lot smaller. Like I wasn't talking to a general public. I was talking to people who were already in on it, you know, a lot of Arabs, obviously, and like the few sort of Westerners who were on board. But when it came to stand up, at least before this, yeah, there was a lot more strength. I was, you know, that's the thing. So I did a comedy album. It's a known comedy institution. I got this gig and I was like amazing. You know, this is last year. I was like feeling really good about it. And, you know, the person who was scouting they saw my comedy. I didn't I was like, oh, there's gonna be a scout, like I'm gonna fucking do my Palestine bits. And he loved it. He was like, I want you to be part of this thing, and it was a great opportunity. So we do the recording, which is a 10 minutes of material. And when I got the first email, because it gets released like months later, and so they cut it up into like multiple little tracks so that each track can get played, and then you get residuals for every play. Like it's a great little gig, right? So when I got the first email and they were showing like all of the tracks, just the names of the tracks, I couldn't listen to them yet. There was only 7 minutes of material. And I was like, strange. Let me
Yeah.
reach out to them and just be like, how come there's less time? I have other friends who've done this, and they all of their time is sort of published, and I don't really understand. And they're like, oh, just for editing purposes, sometimes we just have to cut out certain things, and just for it to like make sense, et cetera, et cetera. I knew what the hell they cut out. I knew, you know what they cut out of the thing.
Wow. Okay.
I don't even need to tell you. And that was just like it's not surprising. I remember the day that I got scouted and I realized I got the thing. I knew right away, I'm like, there is a possibility that I'll be censored,
Hmm.
because that's the reality of being Palestinian and having a voice in any field, in anywhere, whether it's like print or in front of a camera, anywhere that there is a Palestinian, there is like a Zionist in the back, like waiting to censor you somehow, or like just fully not even like show you. You know what I mean? So as soon as I got the gig, I was like, we'll see about let's see where this goes, And immediately it was like, okay, so they totally cut out my Palestine material. And then eventually, once it was released, I'm supposed to get residuals, right? Like I'm supposed to get like money. And everybody that has done this, again, I have friends who've done it, they've gotten like nice little checks every few months, and I've got nothing. So I'm like, this is you go your mind goes there immediately,
Yeah.
right? Like especially like after October 7th. This was released at the end of November,
Hmm.
but the tracks were edited before. So it's the anti-Palestinian like censorship has been ongoing. We know this for like decades now. It's nothing new, but to see it so egregious and like it was just like still shocking.
Yeah, no, and it's like the thing is it's almost like a good sign to be censored. Sorry, that's gonna
Oh
sound
yeah,
really weird. Yeah.
no. I wear it as a badge of honor.
Oh, great. Okay. No, because there's a kind of thing with some of these topics, it feels like especially through comedy, the fear of essentially being an accepted clown almost, you know? And so like the actual politics aren't serious because it's like, oh, it's a joke, it's funny, you know? And those types of comedy I can't stand, where it's like, no, grow a spine, like say something, like don't like because then again it's that question of who is this for? If it's just for the white girls in the front, it's like it's okay, you can laugh with us, it's fine. No, I don't like that. I have no time for that kind of comedy. And I don't know. Again, like I said, comedy always has to have, for me, something
Yeah.
like comedy as a vehicle and not just as like an end in itself.
Yeah, listen, the comedy world, like the stand-up especially, there are so many people that go in with this. They're like they've seen reels or like TikToks of like a dude like being like, just being badass and like destroying a guy in the audience or whatever. And they're like, I want to do that. Like that's what they think comedy is. It's just like being a badass. It's like and it's unfortunate because a lot of these newbies, they have this like insane ego, and they go in with luckily they get humbled pretty quickly, thank God, but it's very irritating to see people come in with this like false idea of like what it is and how they're gonna like destroy, like, so
Mm.
they're just gonna do something cool and then put it online, and that's it, and that's how it works. It's like, nah,
Comedian
dude, it's not.
destroys SJW in audience.
Exactly. Oh, please.
Yeah. So who are your favorite comics? Or even who have you been watching?
Okay, so the guy I mentioned earlier, Abid Rahman, he's like a new. I was following him before, but he just released a special that, it's just it's so on point, and like his approach is really great. You know what it is? This is the thing. So there's like a lot of comedians. Like I used to love Jessica Kirson. I think she's from New Jersey, and she just had, and I saw her last year like live, and she's just like this kind of unhinged woman that like talks about her like Jewishness, and like she's just I found her like outside the box and refreshing. And then you find out that they're like kind of Zionisty and you're like, oh fuck, like you know what I mean? Like so I always reserve like I never worship any celebrity or any like public figure ever because you know that like they're always two steps away from some kind of scandal or being a Zionist or something. So
Yeah.
like, but in comedy, it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, you respect somebody's work and they actually make you laugh, and then it's like I don't want to ever promote them again when I find out like they have shit opinions.
I mean, that's my life story, honestly, because like someone like Jerry Seinfeld, who I never liked as a comedian, but like I like the show. I love the show Seinfeld. And then it's like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
not just like Zionisty, like hardcore piece of shit posting with the IDF Zionist.
Yeah, he's gone fully like I don't know how he was before this, but like he's not hiding the fact that he's like a very obvious Zionist now.
No, before this, yeah, he went to one of these things in the West Bank where it's like a shooting range with the IDF where you shoot at
Oh,
targets. Yeah, it's fucked up. It's been very difficult. My slight saving grace, aside from conversations of separating the art and the artist and whatever, is my favorite part of the show is George Costanza, right? And I mean, I'm not rewatching it these days that much, but so it's like still slightly separate from, or same with Bob Dylan, hardcore Zionist, but like I love those first six albums where it's like that's pure, where,
I did not know he was a hardcore Zionist. Damn.
oh,
Fuck. Shit.
girl,
I mean,
there's a
I know,
song,
I know.
there's a song called Neighborhood Bully that he wrote in 1982 during the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. And it is so Ziopilled. Like, because the song is that, like, his neighbors want him dead, but he's the neighborhood bully. Like this almost like sarcastic, kind of like, you guys are so
Oh,
dumb for, yeah, yeah. He built a
just
desert
like
in the
Zionist
sand.
talking points.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah. He
God.
built a castle in the desert. It's just, and like the Arab armies, all of it. Anyway, so there's been a lot of that for me as well. But especially these days, yeah, you watch something and you're like, let's look into this person a little bit. But then again, even if it's like there's nothing specific about them on their Wikipedia page, I'm still like very sus all the time about
Oh,
most people.
of
Yeah.
course. I mean, I feel like if you got to a very high level of fame, you didn't do that because you were vocally like pro-Palestine or
Yeah.
like said anything about the topic. If you say nothing, even some of the Palestinians like fucking I don't know what he's done recently, but Mo Amer, like, I feel like he's kind of disappeared a little bit. I don't follow him on any social media, but like, he had like a speech at some point. I think it was like maybe in November or something, and it was like this heartfelt speech, and he's like crying, and it's like we need to find our humanity, and it's like, sure, you're saying all of the safe things.
Mm.
Where is the give me something that's gonna get you in trouble? You know what I mean? Like,
A bigger like a sorry, I had to Google Mohammed because I've forgotten he's quite new, but someone who was like
yeah,
similar vibe is
yes,
Rami Youssef.
Yusuf, yeah,
And yeah, he did like SNL a few days ago or a few weeks ago, and same thing. He said Palestine, he said whatever, but it's like, please God, save Palestine, not like please you
fuck
people in the audience,
Israel type of thing. Yeah.
well, fuck Israel, but also please you get out on the streets and fucking do whatever. But yeah, like Rami was I remember a good show that I thought was doing stuff. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about,
You've seen the episode. I don't know if it's I kind of stopped watching after he goes to like Palestine and like he there's a whole like story there. I don't did you what did you think?
I didn't watch past season two. I finished season two and I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
this person they've created this setup for a redemption arc. But I'm like, no, what he's done is so horrific. Fuck that. That feels so like, no, I'm not going to watch season three where he like redeems himself. No.
I don't know that he redeems himself because I didn't watch till the end, but he gets worse.
Oh
It
yeah.
gets so much worse. Yeah, I don't know what. It's terrible. Like I don't even want to tell you, but like it feels like a cop out. And I think the first season had like it was really smart and I think it was probably closer to what his vision was for the show. Obviously, like the more popular it got, I can imagine like the execs being like, okay, we want to
Mm.
like make sure that this is contained because it's getting too real. You know what I mean? Like the fucking Hollywood loves to like stifle any like when it comes to Palestine or like Middle East topics. It's like there's always like this attempt to control what's being said. but it's just yeah, I'm so disappointed with all of these figures, like Rami
Mm,
Youssef, it's like he's I guess like it's like they don't want to they care more about their like the contracts than I don't know. I
clearly. And I mean, like the whole wearing a like tiny little badge in the Golden Globes, so
ugh,
roundabout. No, fuck it. I
please.
don't care.
I've been actually wanting to write about this. Like I like to just do my own writing and I'm like I want to write an entire thing about like the this activism of like I'm wearing a pin.
Yeah.
Look at me, like I did a thing. It's like why don't you just not go to that thing at all? Like it's but maybe it's just I'm biased. To me, it's like nothing is more important than Palestine. Like I'm willing to
Mm,
throw away everything. I don't, and maybe that's why I never like aspired to a lot because I was like, fuck it. Because if anything happens and I have to like put my shit on the line, it's easier to do it if I don't have a lot to
yeah.
lose, like because of Palestine.
No, it's true. Honestly, I just so much of this stuff is just it's disappointing, like you said. And so it's like also I don't invest as much into individuals or into celebrities. I don't give a shit about any celebrity. Well, I did have some celebrities, but also disappointing. I mean, like the Judith Butlers or like Naomi Klein, two like really great, important writers and thinkers and whatever. But then they did write some really terrible stuff in October, and they've sort of like gone back on it, but still not fully. And it's like, I don't know where to place these people now. And even before this,
Yeah.
someone who I had put way too much stock in was Noam Chomsky. And the insane disappointment that I experienced with him vis-a-vis Syria, because he didn't say jack shit for 10 years about the revolution. And so there's so many commitments that I have that then it's hard to, because again, even a lot of these people who are like really vocally and cool about Palestine, like you just look a few years, you look at some of their posts that are not about Palestine, that are about Syria, that are about Iran, that are about the region, that are about Hezbollah, and it's like, oh, okay, like this is some game for you. Then, and this is another reason I hate anybody that talks like geopolitically. Sorry, I don't want to say I hate the people, but I hate the discussions of it because it feels so dehumanizing and separate from any of our like actual attachments to the communities, the lives, the whatever. One thing I will say about Rami, though, my favorite bit about it, sorry, I know I jumped like deep into something else and
Oh,
I'm
that's
like
okay.
jumping all the way back,
That's totally fine.
is I love the mother. The mother character,
Hmm.
حالة عباس شو اسمها مش حالة
هي Abbas, yeah.
هيام عباس. Oh, she reminds me of my mother, but also she's just so sincere and sweet, and I want everything for her. And I loved her. She's brilliant in that show. And it's just it again reminds me of my mother. I realize that I have a huge thing. I've got a mommy complex, right? Uh, and so like another thing is like that film, Everything Everywhere All at Once,
Uh-huh.
which is very much so about mothers and motherhood,
Absolutely.
killed me. I was crying the whole film. And yeah, I love my mother. I give her a shout out every time I do. She comments in all my videos. She listens to them.
Ah,
Yeah, I know.
adorable.
And I think in terms of comedy, I think of her as well because she uses comedy a lot and comedy as
Hmm.
a coping mechanism as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I never even like thought of approaching because my mom and her side of the family are fucking hilarious. And like I'm like, this is actually something to draw upon because and they're all my mom has six sisters. So it's like there are just a bunch of women, and like all of this daughter, like there's just like this and that's something actually that you reminded me of. Like I'd love to draw on that a little bit more because there's something to mine from that maybe is not often done because unfortunately of like sexism in our parts of the world. But yeah, just to get back to Hiyam Abbas and her character, definitely I think that was handled really well. And there's like this delicateness with which they like handle a character like that because it's like how many people out there really understand this person? Like that's a very specific person, and to have given that person a place in that show, I think was fucking awesome. Because mothers are forgotten, man.
mothers are forgotten, Arab mothers are forgotten, immigrant mothers are
Our
forgotten.
mothers. Exactly, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but also like in terms of the US, I think this was the first Muslim American show, Arab American show. Yeah, I think a big thing I didn't like with the second season is the focus on Muslim American that
Yes,
was
yes,
sort
yes,
of
yes.
yeah. I might edit that out because that might be misconstrued. But the point is
No, no. You know what? No, okay, hold on. Because I agree with you. And it's not, it has nothing to do, I think it's a personal thing. It's not to like denigrate a whole population of people, but I don't connect with those stories, and I don't connect with the struggle that people like Muslims in America have to go through, right? And that's not what attracted me to the show in the first place. So I'd like to just say that that's the reason why I didn't connect with season two. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. That became the focus. It used to be something that was connected with the Arab American experience, with the American experience, with whatever. But anyway, thinking about Rami and then going back to like you and your comedy and like the difference between you doing stand-up and doing it online, but also even if you're stand-up, you're doing it in Montreal, is like so yeah, with like Rami is like the first Muslim American thing. And so like I was watching it obviously from Lebanon and being like, this is cool and aware of American society. I've never really lived there, but like very aware that like that's big for there. But like and so like sorry, and then reflecting on the fact that like the comedy in the small places in Lebanon is just completely different from those same comedians, not those comedians, but like similar comedians in the West because there's this thing oftentimes where it's like, honey, there are white people in the audience. Like there are white people watching. It's the same with when it's online, and you begin to like not just self-censor, but like be aware that like who am I talking to, and how will this be understood or misunderstood, and you get into a whole mess. But like when I think about comedy, for instance, I think of it as a coping mechanism at a very personal level with my family, with my people, but then thinking about because we started this conversation very much so thinking about comedy as a tool to reach people. And so that's very much like us as Arabs in the West. How do I reach people who otherwise would not just be like, yeah, let's listen about a speech about Palestine or about, the Swana region.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's like a discrepancy that I struggle with because I don't have my people to sit and cope with as a comedy. And I see a lot of people, I've been talking a lot about this, that see things about like joy as resistance. Here, I'm talking about white people, and they run with it. They're like, yeah, joy is resistance. It's like, no, not for you. Like, stop that.
That is so like peak fucking eat, pray, love kind of approach to life. It's just like honestly, fuck joy. Like it's so overrated. I'm often told like in all of these like creative endeavors that like I play things sad or I like gravitate towards the sad, and I'm like, because I'm fucking Palestinian, dude. Like what do you want? Like it's just like that is just as important and that is just as real. Like I love stories that end badly. You know what I mean? I'm like I'll be like I had this idea for a script, and like someone was like, "Oh, you can't end it like that, because you always have to end on an up." And I'm like, "Why? Who decided that? Some fucking person that never experienced anything in their life and like finds like struggles like to the most minute thing like is too much of a traumatic experience for them to like keep going with their lives. You know what I mean? It's like no, I refuse to like bend to that.
But like, I'm thinking when I was asking you about the comedians that you like, do you know a Lebanese comedian, Hussein Aout?
I may have seen a couple of clips.
Big hair, kind of like eccentric, right?
Yeah.
Like moving. He's great.
Yes, yes. I
And
don't
it's
remember the
not
name,
about
sorry.
ending
Yeah.
on a good note, but it's like the way that he can make comedy around really dark subjects that he has himself experienced. I don't know, I find just inspirational almost. And again, it's like one of those things where it is like an inter-community joke. Like I don't think he can't take his set and go to France and go to Belgium and do it. And I find that so precious, but also so like, hey, I don't know, I can't laugh these days with most people, and I can, but when I'm with my Arab friends, and especially my friends from Beirut, I laugh hysterically. I laugh like it's crazy laughter, you know?
I think that comes also from like we have an inherent kind of funny bone. I feel like people in the Arab world, like there's, or maybe like the Levant and like, sort of there's a certain, I just always found that like comedy was, it's always there, it's always present, and it doesn't matter what's going on, there's like a way to approach things comedically. But yeah, that changes when you're around people who are not from the region, right? Like because they also don't want to sort of offend you or anything, so they might not. And this is the comment again, doing bits about this on stage. It's like some people wouldn't laugh at my Palestine material because they're like, am I going to be offending this person by laughing? It's like, no, that's the point of the show,
Yeah.
dude. Like, you're supposed to be laughing at this. But there's this like inherent discomfort sometimes where it's like they don't understand enough to like want and there's like a sensitivity, or it's just the people who don't understand, it's so that sucks. That sucks. That really does for me, that's a barrier like that has been stopping me from getting back to the stage for sure.
Hmm. So if you haven't been doing much comedy, how's I mean, okay, this is gonna sound like a funny question because I don't know much about Dana Saleh, outside of comedy.
Yeah.
How's your day to day? I don't know, like with everything going on, how are you coping or like what do you
I mean, I have like a the office job that I don't talk about because it's not important, but it pays the bills. That sort of just passes the time. But in general, like I find myself actually wanting to hang out with family more, which is not usually the case, but it's like uh I'm sure you understand why, but like they understand everything. There's no having to explain, there's no having to hide any grief or and there is a sense of like reconnecting with your roots as well because we're so isolated here. Like I only have my direct family here and like two cousins, you know what I mean? So it's like and in general just trying to hang out with people. I have to say like something I learned during this is that like I've successfully culled anyone who is not pro-Palestinian from my life like a long time ago. Like
Yeah.
it's so interesting how Palestinians and like just Arabs in general do that. Like you just sort of like, oh, okay, you're not cool, like you're out and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna talk to you anymore.
Well, it's funny because I have a lot of friends who have told me that they have lost a lot of friends over the last few months. I'm like, really? I haven't lost any because like I've already yeah.
Exactly. That's it. I'm like, well, okay, well, I guess because for us, it's like that was just always at the forefront of
Yeah.
any kind of, they're saying it's like the ultimate litmus test. It's like, yeah, that was always the case for every Palestinian, unless you're somebody like, I don't know, DJ Khaled, who like is like willing to sell out for every like, God, I hate him so much. Um,
Why?
it's just like because he's just such a sellout. It feels like because he's Palestinian, right?
I don't know him very well. Yeah.
Exactly. He doesn't matter, but it's because he's someone who has reached like a level of like success and fame, right?
Okay.
I think he's a producer, and he's like said almost nothing. So I'm just like, fuck you for like,
Like Amal
just
Toulouni.
playing that game. What is up with that?
I don't know.
What happened there?
I have no idea. I'm waiting to go back home. I don't know if you know, but she comes from the same village as my mother.
Oh, shut up, which one?
Ba'lin.
Okay. So you're gonna get the scoop from your mom? I love that.
No, I'm gonna go to the village. I'm gonna go be like, what is up with Amal? But
That's
yeah, I don't
great.
know.
Please let me know. I want to know if you get any like hot goss.
I will. I will. I'll spill the tea. You'll hear it here first.
Please. Yeah, if you break that, Twitter's gonna go crazy.
I don't know. Honestly, it's true. And we started this and I have this conversation a lot whenever we talk about like public figures. So much disappointment. So I haven't lost friends, but I've definitely lost so many people that I had respect for. Two of whom are ContraPoints and Philosophy Tube, right? Natalie Wynn and Abigail Thorne. Do you know these people?
I don't think so.
Oh,
ContraPoints? No, I don't. Yeah, I'm like I wonder what happens in those instances. Is it like fully just they're playing it safe for like to keep their prospects alive, or are they, which this I fucking hate people like this. They just kind of like don't want to choose a side because it's too complicated, or it's like, oh, there's that these fucking people who think that being neutral is something is like a righteous fucking that those people piss me off so hard. Like I would rather you be fascist like than be that because that is so much more cowardly. Like at least I can tear down a fascist argument. What are you doing if you're being so like a radical centrist? Like what the fuck are you being? Like what is this fucking bullshit opinion? It's so you're just a flaccid fucking nothing.
like take a side.
Yeah, yeah.
It's frustrating because then it's like, and honestly, it's become a really big thing, and definitely much more around like men and like a kind of. I've definitely noticed that like online, the manosphere is real,
Hmm.
and there are these like metrics that came out from YouTube and whatever, like the split, who is listening to the Joe Rogans or the Jordan Petersons, and who listens to stuff like my podcast, where it's a bit more. I mean, I honestly, it's like it's a the gender metrics that I get of people who have declared their gender, it's generally like 60% female, 25% male, and then like 15% non-binary. Like men aren't listening to this. Men want the analysis. Men want the objective. Sorry, I don't want to get into this. It actually sounds like really binary
It's
bullshit,
fine.
but
No, I actually find this very interesting because it sounds a lot like my TikTok metrics, by the way.
no, again, because again, so like what are the guys, the boys listening to? It is, destroys SJW, or it's always like much more objective. And I think one thing someone said to me once, this like Irish guy many moons ago, even though I love the Irish, but this guy, whatever, I don't know, spent too much time in London, I guess. He said
Mm.
something that I found so interesting. I hated, but interesting. He said, you know, I decided that I'm only going to read about Israel from Palestinians and read about Palestinians from Israelis. Yeah. Can you vocalize the face you're making?
Uh, what? So
It's
he
pure.
thought, oh my God, this is like he thinks he's doing a thing. This is one of these people that's
Exactly.
like, I'm doing something subversive. Look at me. No, you're not. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. But like the he's done a methodology, and like because part of the goal is the objectivity, is I want to hear from this side and from that side, but I want to hear from that side saying, but and it's wrong. It's just silly.
Okay, sorry, but just the approach to that, I think also shows that this person has doesn't understand that there's like a very strong and powerful propaganda machine on one side. That if they're going to approach it from this like, oh, I'm going to equally look at both things, it's like the playing field is not leveled already. So it just goes to show how much you don't understand the situation. Just you haven't even started, and you're doing it wrong.
But I think it's the same with a lot of people or a lot of different
Yeah.
struggles and like racism in America. There's a lot of this sort of descriptions of desires for objectivity, for like let's have the debate. Like I'm here and actually okay, wait, this is exactly it. The thing that
Ugh.
frustrates me the most is the structural gaslighting of all this, where it's like you have to present an argument. This person is coming calmly. My favorite YouTube description is not X destroys Y. It's X calmly destroys Y.
Yeah.
Because there's again, it's like they're doing something by being, removed and distant and like, well, here are the facts. Well, and then it's the SJW, like, no, you're gonna and then I hate it. And that's something I avoid so much. And that's why in this podcast I have tried never, I'm not trying to do an objectivity of like let's cite the UN, let's cite this source, let's say no, I'm here and I'm talking and this is a truth beyond the kind of factual, beyond the whatever. There is also like a very strong misogyny to this sort of like relegating emotional whatever to like, oh, okay, they're being emotional, so it's not being serious. They're not being serious. Like as soon as you yell, you've lost the argument. Like we're calmly stating facts back and forth, but once you yell, you are too biased. Ugh, the word bias as well. Like, of course I'm fucking biased against genocide, but a
Yeah.
bias against racism, bias against whatever. I hate it.
Yeah. I don't do debates. I
No.
don't believe in debates because especially obviously with Zionists, but it's like you're already legitimizing their opinion by putting them next to you. You know what I mean? And that I reject the idea fully because especially because Zionists have already have their voices are so loud and so many institutions have prioritized Zionist voices. So it's just like one more fucking why are we debating what's his face fucking from whatever? Like it's we need to move past that. We're past that now. But it gets clicks, unfortunately. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. The click economy. Yeah, I was talking to another friend of mine. Sorry, it's the same Nada Hamse, who for some reason, again, and this is the person who like ostensibly is sort of like doing okay,
hmm.
said that she had watched this like 5 hour, she only watched 2.5 hours of it, debate between these four guys,
5 hours. Oh my God.
Norman Finkelstein, Benny Morris, whatever. And I'm like, how? How are you doing this to yourself? And then it's also like, what's the point? Like,
Yeah. What does she say? I'm very curious. Like,
I don't know. I mean, it's just like for some reason she has a lot of space for this. She's a journalist, and so,
mm,
but also like when she was talking to me, and this is in the interview, she was saying like she didn't understand because there's like Finkelstein and the other guy who was with him were making a lot of good points, and the other guys had no good points. And I'm like, yeah, but because it's not about points. It's pure ideology at a certain point. There is a bit of it which is like, yeah, there's certain levels of it where it's like entertainment. And that's why again I can't
oh, for
stand Bassem
sure.
Youssef. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a spectacle, right? That it's just like this. It is come down to a little bit of like, oh, guy destroys whatever. Um, and it's like you get to like chop it up into little clips and you have it go around, make the rounds. But yeah, obviously the fact that your friend has that more sort of positive outlook, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, like allows her to be able to watch these things, like she doesn't have enough rage to like that gets in the way because I would not.
I don't know, but that's exactly what I told her, and she's like, "No, no, I was furious, but I can just keep watching." I was like, "I don't understand." I love her. She's very unique. She's very strange. She's very cool. She's been through so much, and when I talk to her, she just has this kind of nonchalant, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. She's got a sense of humor, and she's just got like a weird, like genuinely a resilient person. And I don't know.
Bless her, honestly,
Bless her, I know.
because I don't know, man.
Bless her and
I'm weak,
عقبالي.
dude. Yeah, بالظبط. Where do you get it? How?
I know, I don't know. And I wanted to, and I like talk to me a bit more about this, please, because I do feel like, yeah, I'm weak, and like I'm weak, but also the some strength does come sometimes. But when I go to a protest here and I see the cops instantly, it's just like, I'm like instantly 1 foot out the door because I can't.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not getting arrested. Fuck. Yeah, I know. And I'm like, there's parts of me that are like, I need to go out there and like push myself to do these like scary things because it'll like maybe condition me to be not so scared. Um, but then I just don't. I don't know. But listen, like this might sound like silly, but it's like what you do, this is a version of that, right? Like you're doing a thing and it's easy for us to like look around and be like, oh, look at this person, what they're doing, and I want to be like that. But it's just if it all it does is like become a self-defeating thing, then what's the point? Like you know already that you want to be more brave or whatever, and that's a good step forward. And I don't want to be like, oh, but it's fine. Like everything is great if you have the right attitude. Like I don't want to be that person, but we got to find like a little bit of that positivity somewhere in order to like keep going because otherwise, because that's what I'm struggling with right now, which is just like this constantly like self-doubt and like hating yourself and not feeling adequate enough. And it's like, okay, so how am I adding anything positive to what's happening? Like if I want to make a difference and if I want to like find like self-fulfillment and all these things, it's like I can't do any of that if all I'm doing is like shitting on myself.
So, but that's what I'm kind of shitting on myself, but publicly.
Hey,
Well,
great.
right? So, but that's the thing. It's been a consideration where it's like, well, I think there does need to be a space for this. It's not like the main thing, but I've definitely heard a lot of conversations where it's like, you know what I mean? And I was raised male, and so there's a lot of like, don't show the pain.
Listen, I was raised female and I also was raised like that, FYI. So
No, I know we're both raised Arab, but
exactly.
again, I say this all the time. The phrase that I find the most interesting in these discussions, and I'm very interested in these like little micro phrases, blah, blah.
Story of my life.
Yeah, yeah. Blah, swallow it. Like,
Swallow it.
don't even fucking cry. Or
I
then like
reapplied it in other ways, but
yeah,
anyways.
not in this podcast. But
Okay.
yeah, or like, versions of I'll give you something to cry about. But anyway, so like but I'm afraid, so like okay, on the one hand, it's like I want to do a thing where I'm like publicly being like it's okay to cry, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to this moment requires us to be fucked up, you know what I mean? But on the other hand, yeah, I don't want to project an image of weakness or whatever, or I don't want to, I'm
Ugh,
afraid of
I
indulging
know.
sometimes,
Hmm.
being too
Hmm.
indulgent. And obviously, the sort of answer is somewhere in the middle because it's like, yes, if we do just keep pushing ourselves, we will burn out, and then we'll be even more useless than we were before. But yeah, I don't know. That's something I've been thinking a lot about.
I have a question for you. Do you have a fear of, because like, we have this little online community or like all of these people that sort of like are tangentially related, whether it's like through your podcast or whatever. Do you have a fear of like saying or doing the wrong thing? Does that
Yeah.
stop you sometimes? Okay.
Well, and like it
How
may
how yeah, like how present is that when you're whether it's like the podcast or like writing things online or, posting shit?
honestly like quite present. No, I had to be honest. And like on different sides because like first like scrutiny from the state, like I am scared of the state I live in at the moment,
Yes,
in
yes, yes, yes.
Europe and whatever. So I am afraid of saying something that might be misconstrued or like understood in a certain way.
Where are you, by the way? You're
Vienna,
in Switzerland? Oh
Austria,
yeah, okay.
which has been hella Zionist and has been whatever in the society and the state and the whatever. So there is like a side of it where like I am worried that like I'm just going to be labeled as an anti-Semite or something. And so I remember like talking a little bit about armed resistance and being afraid that that's going to be whatever. But then also, yeah, from my own people, because there is like the last 6 months. I mean, there's been a big resurgence of a kind of, I'm not going to call it radical, but like a very intense, how do I describe this? Do you know who the Mumena are?
No, I don't think so.
So they're kind of Arab tankies.
Hmm.
They're defenders of people of like Hezbollah or like the Syrian regime or like of Iran or whatever. And so who have this kind of calibration where with like these are anti-imperialists, but like don't recognize the violence and the extermination that those same people have done and whatever.
Oh, like I said
Like I
this
said, yeah,
kind of
I said this is
okay.
exactly it. Yeah. And the problem is, and even tankies, the last 6, 8 months, ugh, there's been a resurgence of them, but sometimes it's so scary. They've been making a lot of sense.
Oh, I know. I know.
And especially because I feel so weak and so disempowered that like oftentimes I know these people, I know they're assholes. I know not to like find them genuine and I know their history, but they say stuff that I'm like, yes,
Yes, I
you
know.
know?
Yeah, I've definitely, yeah, felt that as well.
And it's difficult because there's not that strong alternative. Like the other side of things, the people who I agree more with in their history and whatever, are only kind of like being pedantic.
Listen, I know. I know. Yeah. I struggle with this too. It's like if Palestine the only thing we should be focusing on, and not in the sense that like if the person's politics outside of Palestine are kind of like wishy-washy or like just things that I don't agree with, but on Palestine they're just like hitting it and they're just being, you know what I mean? And I'm like, what does solidarity really look like? Is it allowing those people in despite all the other shit, or becoming so like, just kind of trimming the hedge so hard that like you're like, what are we left with kind of thing?
Mm,
I know the right answer, but I'm afraid of like the implication of cutting people out of the struggle or like of this of all this fervor right now because I'm like, we need as many people as we can.
yeah.
But I also don't when they say like Palestinian liberation is like liberation for everybody. Like, but that's not, we're not just saying that. Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
real.
There is a quote by Mahmoud Darwish that I think about all the fucking time. It's this little bit that he does in like a Godard film in like 2000, where he asks the question, why are the Palestinians so famous? And here he's talking to an Israeli journalist in the film. And he says, because you are our enemy. The attention of the world is on you. The interest in the Palestinian problem is an extension of the West's interest in the Jewish problem, the Jewish question. And he says, you have given us, by being our enemy, you have given us great defeat and great renown. And this is Mahmoud Darwish. This is the former like national poet of Palestine. There's so much depth to what he's saying, obviously.
Hmm.
And obviously, that's not necessarily the full implications of it because, like, the reason that I in Lebanon know about Palestine or the Palestinians is very different from why people in the West. But this is why I'm very suspect of a lot of people who, I mean, lately have made Palestine their like personality.
Please.
Yeah. but because, and this is why it's not, I don't feel pedantic when when I'm like Palestine is the metric, but then there's also a couple other like verification questions because if it's the
Yeah, yeah,
only
yeah.
thing, but then you are completely whitewashing the crimes of Assad, who again, it's not like a one like a tangential thing. He's intimately tied to Palestinian
Mhm.
resistance, to whatever the Assad regime in the 70s crushed the or like were attacked the PLO, blah blah blah. There's like a history of it. But so yeah, this is why I'm deeply suspect of like a lot of white people if they like hyper fixate on it on Palestine because it's like to wait, why are you interested in this? Is it for the dignity and the freedom of the people, or is it like an anti-Western imperialist, like it's focused on that? And this is where the tankies come into play as well, because it's like it's so difficult to point this out now. And I have been hesitant oftentimes to point out when it's like, oof, you're posting this person's fucked, because it always feels a bit pedantic. But in the present moment where it's like there's a fucking genocide happening and we need all hands on deck. And I have seen a lot of people that do this that I think do it very poorly and are very damaging, where it's like it is a pedantic thing, or even in themselves are not conveying the fact that where they're coming from is from a place of like human dignity, of the protection of all communities or whatever. Like actually care about Arabs, actually care about our lives, actually care about the indigenous people of the region. And so this is why I'm like deeply suspect of people who only focus on like a Western imperialism on Israel and have nothing to say about Iranian imperialism or like the Syrian regime or Russia or whatever.
I fully agree with you. This is like a so I again when I was writing about this like years ago, there was like so many things that I could see coming. It's like because in 2021 we started seeing like more support for Palestine and like an unprecedented level of like just talking about it online. And I was like, I know that once this gains enough momentum that we're going to be like there's going to be a lot of bandwagoners that are going to co-opt this, and it's inevitable. Like it's just part of like things gaining momentum. But yeah, we're at an awkward spot. But I think through constantly calling out these people and like their intentions, I think that's all we can do at this point. As long as it like that stays at the forefront and like we don't lose sight of the humanity of it, right?
I want to circle back a little bit before we
Yeah,
wrap up towards comedy.
sure. Sure, yeah. I think you've been trying to do it this whole time, and I just keep like,
No, no, no. I don't know. I
yeah.
just, yeah. I like this. I don't know. It's nice. I've never actually talked to you, and this is it's funny. I've only seen, I've read your tweets, I've seen your videos. I miss your videos actually, if I'm honest.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Yeah, listen, I post a little bit more on TikTok. I just find like Twitter is a weird place. I don't know. I get weird about posting my videos, especially like right now, trying to be like, oh, here's a funny thing, guys, like that I made. Please like it. Like, whereas on TikTok, that is the platform. The whole point is to like post to your face or whatever. But so if you know, not that there's a lot, but there's like a couple of things going on over there. If you have TikTok, if not, that's fine too.
No, I don't know. Yeah, I mean TikTok, that's already a segue. So like first of all, yeah, how are you engaging in whatever ways you are? But then also in a kind of really broad sense, if this episode is going to be called Comedy and Liberation, how do you see
Mhm.
those two things connected if you do see them connected?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. I mean, comedy is another medium. Like you were talking about George Carlin, it's like there's so much room in comedy for like political discourse, but so there's something that happens with some comedians like as they get older, you'll see it like with like Chappelle and stuff. Unfortunately, like young Chappelle, if you asked me like 15 years ago, I'd be like Chappelle's the best comedian. He's amazing. I love him. His first two specials are like one of the funny, like just as funny as anything that's coming out today. But then it's like they get especially the men, they get just wrapped up in like certain types of even George Carlin, like it got less about the jokes and it got a lot more about like the politics, and it's like where do those two things meet and continue to be when it continues to be comedy, and I'm not far along in my career to say that like I understand what that is. I just know that there is room for it, and I do get inspired by other comedians who are doing it and not doing it because it's popular, like people who've just always had that going on. There's a lot of Palestinians, like small time comedians. I don't know if you know Athir Yaqub. Yeah, she's great. There's like a little community of especially like Middle Eastern and Levantine like comedians that are coming up now that are a lot less afraid. And I think that we're realizing that like, okay, we're gonna have to give up the fact that like the pre-existing institutions which can lead to material success are not going to be the avenue that is that we should be aiming for at this point. And that's like it's just like reworking the way that you go about your comedy. And I we have fucking online platforms now that can do that for us. Like I don't need fucking I don't know, the Comedy Network to like put me on, or like late night with whatever to like put me on stage to make me feel like I achieved something. Because those are not the even though those people will pay you, like ideologically I'll feel like a sellout if someone like that puts me on their stage. So if I keep that in mind, I think that it'll start to make sense, and like the material will come out, hopefully.
And so a bit more towards though the like in a kind of utopic ideal of liberation, what do you think comedy looks like? Is that too like did I put you on the
That's a
spot
big
there?
question. No, no, I don't know that I could even answer that question, because like it's an interesting way to look at liberation. Because to me, like when I think of liberation, I think of like the land and like what it means for right of return and things like that. But I'm like, comedy? I didn't even think about that. I don't know. That's actually very interesting. I think that I don't know if I can answer that, just because so much will happen
Yeah.
into, you know what I mean? And like, what is that going to look like? I was listening to a podcast, Electronic Intifada. I'm sure you know it. They have great, my God, their last few episodes, amazing. Um, what is this face? What are you doing? What is
So that's electronic intifada is one of those examples where it's like the content on Palestine has been so good and so important, but that have a really horrible history of and like continue with Syria and with
Oh,
Iran
see,
and
I
with
didn't know
whatever.
that. Fuck.
I know the guy who
Too
runs
bad.
it. Yeah. So it's hard. That's
Abunima?
just Abu Nima
Oh no, he's
Abdullah.
the
He's an older
his
guy.
first name is Ali, but I think he's maybe he's not the guy who runs it. He
Oh,
might be
okay.
like more the spokesperson or something. Oh, okay, I did not know that. That sucks ass, dude.
I know. I'm
Because like,
sorry.
oh, that's okay. But you know what?
We can't
Let's
have anything good.
just to say, no, that's it. You know what? This is the problem with fucking Arabs, though. It's just like we're so fraught. Like we're such a stupid people. It's just
No, again, and this is the problem
uh,
because like when we talk about Palestine and like obviously the way that Palestine has been so co-opted by so many regimes in our region for decades, right? This is like the kind of what's the word? Like almost raison d'être of some of these regimes,
mhm.
or at least in their propaganda and their perception of whatever, and what have they done for Palestine? Jack shit. But is beyond all of this, right? That there is so much more work that needs to be done in thinking of liberation and thinking of actual revolution, uh, specifically in our region, beyond Zionist colonization and Western imperialism. And so, sticking with comedy a little bit, the reason that Shadon is so fucking powerful is she's just an open out lesbian who makes comedy about that and like just openly says it. And one of my favorite bits of hers a while ago was like a bit about like getting her period during class and like how do you pass the tampon between, your friends, and doing a bit about that is huge, and then like it's not just a punchline, it is like built into the whole structure of the joke, into the bit, and it's great. It's so powerful. And here we're talking about like queer liberation and we're talking about like female liberation because comedy, yeah, has this sort of effect, not just like in a very political, like talking about states and talking about the sort of levels of violence that we're experiencing now and everything and witnessing now. But yeah, towards all these other things, because it's a place to break boundaries or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like comedians often will like speak truth to power or whatever, like and that's why to me like I can't even imagine what like comedy in a liberated Palestine might look like. Because if that obviously there's so okay, the reason why I had mentioned Electronic Intifada, because there was an episode that was done where there was a discussion between like Palestinian intellectual and some two other people. One of them was a South African man who was like fought for the end of apartheid. And he was saying how there was a moment in time where, like, when apartheid ended 4 years later, he would have never, ever in a million years guessed that they were that close to it. And that with that 4 years, so much happened that could have never been anticipated. That it's like, it gave him a little bit of hope in terms of, like, when it comes to Palestine, because there's so much can happen so quickly. And so that's kind of how I feel about comedy in the future. It's like when it comes to Palestine, it's like there's so much that can happen so quickly. I think that it's when it comes to comedy specifically, I can't picture what that looks like. But I can picture what liberation looks like in general, though, because I think about it a lot. You know what I mean? Like that to me is a lot more real for some reason
Hmm.
than that. Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's
I
a,
mean,
definitely a question I'm gonna think about more.
yeah, because in thinking of it as a realness, thinking of it as like within this imaginary of picturing the future, thinking of all those other things that go with it, like what does sex look like? When it's like there's a really interesting article and then a book that was written a few years ago about like how women have better sex under socialism. And so yeah, because it's like I think the crux of it is because like so much of patriarchal relationships, heterosexual relationships, are structures of domination or of property, wherein usually the woman is quite dependent on the man. And so then, like, the sex is not necessarily something that's like fully amongst equals, or sorry, that sounds, I'm not sure if I'm giving it justice or whatever, but you understand what I mean. Like, they're not dependent on the man.
Yeah.
And so then it's like full choice of like who I sleep with and who I end up with that has nothing to do with the fact that this asshole has money. And so, yeah, I don't know. And I do this experiment a lot with myself because what does queer liberation look like? Like, and thinking about what does a queer safety look like in a post situation or whatever. It takes a lot of thinking because we are far from it, but also
hmm
if we can't imagine it, we can never really manifest it, or we can't even work towards it. Which reminds me of
That's a
this
good
sort of
point.
seminal quote. Yeah, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism.
No, no, yeah, like just that the idea that I mean, I don't know, but don't you think that Arabs are we're very good at like just the doomsday scenarios? Like we love a good doomsday scenario, it feels like.
I'm reminded of this really, what's it called, like famous tiny, tiny clip of this Egyptian woman who gets asked, like, what are your hopes for the new
Oh,
year? And yeah,
love this clip. Every New
Liamet
Year's I want to post this
Yeah,
clip.
yeah, yeah. And
El
yeah, just
Fully.
doomsday, just judgment day. Yeah.
We've been ready.
Yeah,
Take
we've
me
been ready
now.
when we
I've been ready. Okay.
yeah. It's dark. It's dark because I think our comedy, but that's what I think about our comedy is so dark. And is that like just how it is, or is it just because we've been so oppressed and fucked over for like decades and centuries?
I'm biased. I think that yeah, the darkness is a part of it. So I can't even imagine now. Like I have a friend who he was like taking an acting class, and he was saying how like he has trouble with characters that are like grieving. He's like, my life was just so like I don't have any like major loss in my life. So I don't know how to play that. And I was just like, interesting. Like there's people like that out there.
My partner, and I'll end on this because they don't
Uh-huh.
like it that I tell the story. So I dream terrible dreams every night for years. It's been horrible, but like especially since
hmm
Beirut and whatever. Anyway, and all of my insecurities, but also now traumas and whatever. But my partner once came up to me and told me that they dreamt they were in the middle of the sea and a shark came up to them. And the shark was about to attack them, and they punched the shark in the face, and the shark swam away. And I'm like, what? That's possible? Because as a setup, that is an impotency dream. You are in the sea,
hmm
like we are never more impotent than when we're not
Yeah.
what's it called. And then the shark, the master,
In open water.
and that you were still able to whatever. It blew my mind because I was like, wait, you can have like that's possible to have a dream wherein you are so capable. And then I think afterwards they flew. Actually, they flew out of the water. And it's just like, what are you talking about?
No, that what's fascinating about that is not that they could do that in the dream, but that even came up as an option. Like that it wasn't immediately, oh, this is a doomsday kind of nightmare, and you accept your fate, the horrific death. It's like, no, that's fascinating. Like, I think what your partner's from where? Just so I understand a little bit more.
Austrian,
Like, oh, they're
Austrian,
Austrian. Okay,
white
so yeah, that
Austrian.
makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. I connected immediately to this.
On that note, no. But I have to say, like having this conversation is just good for me because uh, it's like you're not alone, and like I'm not the only person fucking feeling shitty and not knowing what to do, and so like that usually like I get boosted by others, even if they're depressed and anxious.
I agree. The first interview I did was with Lino, who's a friend of yours. And I remember the conversation was quite dark and quite intense, and I'd been feeling in general pretty shitty. But after that conversation, I felt quite invigorated because there was just this connection, and it's like I'm not alone, but also like we can figure this out together. And I don't know. And I do just miss these conversations, so I'm really glad we had this one.
Me too. I would love to like have this anytime. It doesn't even have to be like a podcast thing.
Oh, cute. Okay. Yay. Yeah, well, I mean, I do like the bigger project around all of this, like not talking about the fire these times, talking about like the community of grief. And so I don't know, maybe if you'd like actually to join the watch parties where we watch every Sunday and we sit and we talk.
I totally do. And in
Okay.
fact, I would love. So how does this work? I thought it was like a physical thing, or you're doing it
No, no, it's
online?
online. It's
Please, I'm
online
telling
over
all my
Zoom.
friends.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, because it's been a great
Yes.
set of people that I've like
Dude,
accumulated over the
okay.
last.
Absolutely, absolutely, fully. I thought you were doing it like a physical thing. I was like, I'm stealing this idea. I'm doing this here because
Oh, no, okay.
I, but no. This is even better because I think the community can be more like diverse that way.
Really cool, diverse. Also, love this. Usually I'm the only guy.
Ah,
I'm the only cis man. I love it. I
love
love it.
that.
Yeah. And then there's like one white person. And it's like I love it's like 10 people. And so for me I'm like this is like a success. Again reflecting the
Absolutely
podcast metrics where it's like mostly non-white, mostly
true.
non-men.
I listen. We'll see who decides to do it with me, but I have a lot of people that probably would be interested in this, and if you're okay with like expanding it, is it only Palestinian movies that you're doing,
At the moment,
or
yes,
it's
but I'm gonna run out
okay?
soon. Yeah, I'm gonna keep this in because this serves as a kind of marketing for
Promotion.
yeah, for
Yes.
exactly.
Love it.
And so yeah, if anyone listening would like to join the Palestine Watch Party, reach out, and it happens every Sunday. And yeah, okay, Dana, thank you so much. I really love this, and yeah, I hope
Me
you
too.
stay
Thank
safe.
you. You
Okay,
too. Thank you so much.
see you.
See ya.